Hello everyone, my name is Capcola, and today we're going to be talking about making monsters memorable. I'm a firm believer that every combat or encounter should have a reason or purpose, and that reason or purpose should be accentuated by the monsters you choose to use in that encounter. For example, if you get into a fight with a bunch of street toughs because they were insulting you and goading you on, then throughout the fight they should continue to do something along those lines up until they start to lose, and then maybe they run away. More recently, I had my ascent group on board of a deck of a ship, finding a band of assassins as they were trying to escort a person of import to another location. As they were fighting, the ship rocked and shuddered suddenly as if it had hit, a rock formation or some other entity. And I described as these large talons reached up over the sides of the ship and this large lizard entity. Let me go grab the mini. This guy right here. Essentially, it was this crazy thing with a dog-like pendant set around its kind of bulging neck. But as this thing boarded the ship, then the fighting continued. I kept referring back to how the wounds of this thing were mending together and the flesh kept pulling itself back together at the start of its turn. Eventually, that thing was the last thing standing on the deck of the ship, and Rhett dealt the final blow, just kind of knocking off the deck of the ship into the water below. And Boulder got remembering that I said there was a pendant around its neck, dove into the water to retrieve it. Now, this all sounds par for the course, characters fighting monsters and winning, but whether my players knew or not, I made this thing pretty much a troll, kind of lizard hybrid, and the only thing I changed was I gave it a swim speed. And trolls regenerate hit points unless they take fire or acid damage. And because that thing had not taken fire or acid damage since the last round of combat, after Boulder got dove in to retrieve the necklace, I described how he took it off easily, but as he saw at the corner of his eye, the face of this dead beast, suddenly the eyes flew open. And he reached out to try and grab Bouldergut to bring him down with him. Luckily, Bouldergut is a barbarian, and he was able to just take 2 swipes at this thing to knock it unconscious again and be able to swing back to the bow of the ship. And then I described as the creature just started slowly floating away up until it wriggled back into consciousness and just swam back away from the boat toward shore. When I described the troll opening its eyes in the water and reaching out, there were audible gasps and confusion at the table. I don't know if they hadn't thought that the monster's regeneration persisted beyond, its consciousness, or if I hadn't done a good enough job describing this thing heals. Regardless, this was maybe the second time I've ever introduced a monster with regeneration capabilities, and I think it made a great impact on the players. And in case anyone was actually wondering, this is actually a large Crassus. Don't know what that is, if I'm being honest. Following that, I wanted to talk about the Rakshasa. If you don't know what a Rakshasa is, it's this thing. It's a devil whose true form is a tiger-like humanoid form with backwards hands. This monster has limited magic immunity, which makes it immune to being affected or detected by spells of 6th level or lower. I've never run a Rakshasa, but if an 11th level wizard casts Disintegrate on this thing, and it does nothing, it'll put the fear god in him. But what I really like about the Rakshasa is its one singular vulnerability. It's vulnerable to piercing from magic weapons wielded by good creatures. This fiend is immune to some of the strongest magic out there, but, is vulnerable to a kindly bard with a +1 dagger. I think it would just spawn stories like, remember that time Zaros casted harm on that one guy and he brushed it off, but he got scared when the halfling started shanking him? Also, a note to my players, just because I haven't run a Rakshasa doesn't mean they're not in my worlds already. And I wanted to address the Skulk. The Skulk is a mostly invisible creature unless 3 scenarios happen. 1, it's a 10-year-old or younger child looking at them, or they are visible in a reflection. Right, interesting scenarios. I think it would be really good to integrate into a encounter. Maybe the rogue sees the reflection of this gray-skinned man in the paladin's shield, or they research beforehand and they realize that they have to bring a child into the combat with them to be able to see and know where they are. Or they can try the third option, which is, let's see, that's, imagine your players learn that information when trying to research what could potentially be stealing children from their hometown. That is something that is so out there and I think would just be very memorable. Finally, a monster of my own creation. I think I took this a bit from the monsters I mentioned previously, and also, I don't remember where I remember this, I think it was a game of Acquisitions Incorporated, but the characters were going through a mine and they found a very deep pit, and from the bottom of the pit they heard voices. Or a voice, and as they were asking it questions, it only ever repeated 2 lines back to them, and it was something along the lines of, "Help, I'm hurt, and send for a medic." And the players thought that was strange, and they decided not to investigate further, and I kind of took that idea and I pushed further into it.
Förbarmande.
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 Förbarmande. I call it the Förbarmande, and I'll put the stat blocks that I made for it here. For the name, this is something that I occasionally do whenever I come up with a new monster or magic item. I took a word that I wanted to be included into the monster's description, and I put it in Google Translate, and I translated it to a random language. In this regard, it was Förbarmande, which is Swedish for mercy. If a Swede ever watches this video, I'm sorry for butchering your language. For this monster, it would lure people in by giving out these sounds of distress and kind of bringing them closer to them so that he can strike. And that's kind of how I got the word mercy. The characters would come in trying to help someone, but would ultimately fall into a trap. Now, the players that encountered this were actually in the Underdark, and I wanted to really give it that strange, just alien Underdark theme. So I ultimately settled on making it a huge living plant with vulnerability to fire. For the shape, I thought it would kind of be like a pitcher plant, and I'll put a picture of that somewhere so that you guys can have a reference. But instead of on a vine, it would be embedded into the earth or kind of at an angle on the wall so that people could look in and see this. What's inside at the back of the mouth is this human-like protrusion with arm outstretched like a bait to try and get people to go in and help out this individual. But when it's prey, when the characters got close enough to see this human-like protrusion, I think they figured out that it wasn't exactly humanoid. And imagine a plastic gloves with one of the fingers inverted, kind of just dangling into the center of it, and imagine that becoming uninverted. That's kind of what happened. This thing, as it uninverted, the humanoid shape split apart in two, kind of Resident Evil style, and split into a mouth, and two vine-like pseudopods shot out from its arms and tried to grapple whoever it was near. I figure in an encounter where someone's going to potentially help someone and is instead bait and switched and attacked, which, you know, isn't uncommon, it would be pretty memorable, especially if it's this Resident Evil horror. But to reiterate the point of the video, I wanted to go over that monsters can have traits that contribute to the importance or the purpose of an encounter. If this guy regenerates after a fight and gets away, then they know that the next time they see them. If the Rakshasa survives being stabbed by the bard and escapes, then the party will remember next time that he's vulnerable to that kind of damage, should they meet him again, which they probably will because Rakshasa are super rude. And with the Skulk, if they get into a fight with this thing and they have no idea what's happening, they're just being attacked by this invisible force, and they do research and they figure out it's this thing called the Skulk, and there's these obtuse ways to seeing them, then that's going to be very memorable. I think it would create more dynamic and fun encounters. But thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and leave a comment of what your most memorable fight would be in D&D. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.